Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this London HR Connection webinar on the subject of delivering a return on investment on workforce wellbeing. And before we start, for GDPR purposes, I wanted to let you know that this session is being recorded. We'll be making the recording available to all participants after the webinar, so no need to take notes from that point of view. Your microphones will be muted during the webinar. We have a large number of participants online, but we would encourage you to submit questions and comments via the chat function on Zoom. I guess you're all familiar with Zoom these days. And Andres will pick up these questions later on in the session. This webinar is scheduled to last up to 1.5 hours. For those of you who haven't met before, my name is Craig McCoy. I'm the chair of London HR Connection, which is a role I've held for the last 8 years. I'm also Senior HR Director with 35 years experience in the profession and a fellow of the CIPD. A few words about London HR Connection. We're a long-established professional networking group for everyone with remain affiliated. We have an independent board, which I chair, consisting of 9 senior HR professionals. In normal times, we're better known for our live events with great speakers and great networking. However, during these COVID times, we can't offer you any wine and canapes, unfortunately, so you'll have to provide those for yourselves. We do plan to reopen our doors soon, maybe even before Christmas, so please do watch this space, and we hope to see you in the flesh very shortly. We are a not-for-profit organisation. Our model is based on commercial sponsorship in order to cover our running costs. And this slide shows our current annual sponsors who are drawn from a number of sectors within the HR industry. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And I'd now like to introduce our sponsor for today's webinar is Thrive, the leading digital mental wellbeing app. And Dr. Andres Fonseca is the CEO and co-founder, and he's joined today by a panel of very highly experienced speakers on this topic, and includes speakers from Vinci PLC, Fieldfisher and the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, and therefore a very strong panel on the topic. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Andres, who's going to be hosting the webinar. So over to you, Andres.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thanks to the London HR Connection for organizing the event. As Craig said, I'm Dr. Andres Fonseca. I'm not the founder, I'm just one of the founders at Thrive. I'm also a car-carrying psychiatrist to this day. So when me and my co-founders started Thrive, we wanted to change the way people access mental health services. And our main goal at the time was to remove all the barriers that people face when they're trying to improve their mental well-being, from waiting lists to stigma to having to take time off work to access services. And we focused on prevention, on early detection and self-management of these conditions to empower people to take control of their mental health. When we, with time, we introduced then the ability to directly access therapists without limiting the number of sessions and without having to wait for weeks on end. Our model is based on the elimination of waiting lists and the elimination of a set number of sessions for treatment. Is more led by clinical need. So for us, a return on investment is what makes everything sustainable. This is seen as something that is very financially hard-nosed, but in reality, if we are not thinking about it, we are unlikely to have any real impact. In the case of mental health, given that the estimated cost is around 100 billion pounds in the UK annually, it is important to always consider how much of that our interventions are saving. The good news is that for interventions that we introduced at the preclinical phase, at the phase where the symptoms are mild or just developing, or people are actually at risk, the return is about £4 to £7 for every single pound investment. There are very few things, if you think about it, that offer you these types of returns. So we at Thrive look at this closely. Because we use validated clinical measures that screen for the presence of depression and anxiety, we're able to track how many people using our services are recovering. And from data published by the HSC, we know that on average, people spend 21 to 24 days off per episode of mental ill health. This does not even count the phenomenon of presenteeism, which is when people are actually physically at work, but they're not able to perform their jobs due to the fact that they are actually unwell. Because we're able to track recoveries, we can estimate the number of days that we're saving for each individual that recovers. By using the average salary of staff in a company, we're able to calculate money saved. And this is our first approximation at calculating a return on investment. And it does not even take into account episodes of depression and anxiety or other conditions that people never present with. The great thing about this is that money saved is always linked to good outcomes for the workers themselves. We are counting recoveries, and in the future we plan to be able to count episodes that never actually happened. And if we are effective at delivering both prevention and recovery, we're having a major positive impact in the lives of people and also providing a great financial return. So from our point of view, we know that the more effective, more engaging, and more accessible we are, the more cases we will prevent and the more people we will help, and the better return we will produce for our partners. And with me today, we have three fantastic speakers. Craig introduced them briefly, representing our three partners. And what I'd like to do now is to invite them to introduce themselves. So I think first we have Helen Knight, who's Group Health and Wellbeing Manager at Vinci Construction. Helen, did you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So as Andrea said, Helen Knight, Group Health and Wellbeing Lead for Vinci Construction UK. And for those of you who may not have heard of us, we have kind of four main divisions. One of them is a facilities function, one is a building. We have civil engineering and Taylor Woodrow, and we also have a technology centre as well. So really excited to be here to talk you through some ROI and how we've connected that through to our new wellbeing strategy.
Brilliant, thank you, Helen. We've got Tom Freestone, who's HR business partner at Fieldfisher. Tom, do you want to say something?
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, everyone. Hope you're well. You see us. I'm a HR business partner at Fieldfisher, and I've been with the firm for just over 6 years now. I'm acting kind of the key liaison with the firm regarding our wellbeing strategy from the perspective of our HR advisory team, and work quite closely with our people development, reward and I&D teams, and as well as our firm management in regards to driving our wellbeing strategy, but also initiatives we have in the business across our offices. In terms of Fieldfisher, we're a global law firm ranked in the top 25 in the UK. We're a commercial kind of outfit and kind of cover all the specialisms you may expect a commercial law firm to do so, things like corporate dispute resolution, IP law, and so on. We're worldwide based with about circa 1,500 staff and partners across 25 locations, but we're headquartered in the UK, out of the City of London, but also have established offices in Belfast, Birmingham, and also Manchester, which is where I'm based.
Thank you very much, Tom. And we also have Claire Rennie, who's Health and Wellbeing Manager at the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. Hello, Claire. Do you want to sort of introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you, Dr. Andreas. Yes, Claire Rennie. I work at the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, the NDA. We are 7 businesses form the NDA group, and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Manager at the NDA Corporate Centre based up in Cumbria. We have around 15,000 employees across the group and quite an extensive supply chain. So I'm going to talk to you today about our wellbeing strategy, where we are, kind of our history, where we've come from over these last few years, our current kind of position and our plans for the future. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. So as the speakers take us through their presentations, please pop any questions, as Craig said, into the chat. I'll be taking a look at that. I'll be monitoring that. What we will do is once the speakers finish, I will put those questions to them and please keep them coming. And with now, I give you now Helen Knight from Vinci. So Helen, let me set up your first slide.
Perfect, thank you, Andreas.
There we go. There we are.
Wonderful, thank you. Next slide, please.
All right.
Excellent, thank you. Well, as I said, really excited to be here and looking forward to just taking you through a really brief insight into how, I guess, I've been using return on investment in terms of getting sign off for a new strategy, and also sharing with you our Thrive return on investment as well. Thank you, Andreas. Next slide. Perfect. And next slide.
Oh, there's some animations.
Oh yeah, I've got animations on there just to add to the challenge, but please do just just rather than me saying next one. Wonderful. So Vinci facilities, we have approximately 2,500 employees within our facilities business. We've had real challenges through COVID. We've got a healthcare sector where we've had teams of engineers looking after oxygen machines within hospitals, etc. We've had a lot of our frontline staff within contracts within facilities, etc., working extra hard throughout COVID. So essentially, this has given us a really good opportunity to kind of work closely with the business, to open up two-way communication, to listen to the needs of people and how people are feeling. And that feedback and that insight that we've got really from throughout the pandemic has kind of fed into development of the new strategy. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm very much an evidence and data-led person. I like the science behind what we do. And I know because of the people we've got on this call today, that many of you will recognise that there is really strong evidence between organisations that have happy and engaged employees that they will see a return, an increased return on performance, both individually and hopefully feed through to the organisation. It will help in terms of, you know, attraction, etc., and recognition as well in terms of the marketplace and benchmarking for the organisation. So I think there, you know, I'm sure many of us on the call today will probably have already been sold into the whole wellbeing piece. And I wanted just to share some stats and figures and show you, I guess, how I use it if I'm working through a strategy with some of our leaders, and recognising, depending on the audience as well. So some people quite often say to me, wouldn't it be wonderful if we didn't have to put ROI or figures into these kinds of strategy development, etc. Wouldn't it be wonderful? And I guess maybe it's a vision one day for us that we can go in and sell it into an organisation and just say, because it's the right thing to do. But actually, I think we're quite a way off that. So certainly when I'm developing a strategy, I will always think of projected return on investment. I've popped a slide in there as well around looking at traditionally some wellbeing programs may have been seen. Sorry, if we can go back, I'm still on that one. Thanks. I'll give you a shout, Andreas. Thank you. You know, I think some of the challenges with wellbeing strategies a few years ago, as some of them may have been seen to be quite isolated, prohibitive in terms of not being able to reach everyone. So I think it's really important to be able to reach your frontline workers as well as all your office populations as well. So how I've positioned our new strategy for Vinci facilities is that we want to be as inclusive as possible. You know, we want to innovate, etc. as well. So I think that's really important. We want to shift away from working reactively, and I'm sure many organisations throughout COVID, we have been reacting, and we have needed to react very quickly to the needs of our people. So over time now, as we work more strategically, I think it would be good to work more towards early intervention and then ultimately prevention. So then I put a slide in about projected cost savings, and Andrea's already mentioned the whole presenteeism piece. So although these were generic stats and figures that I took the directors and the senior leadership team through to kind of sell the strategy in, if you like, I really wanted to kind of get people thinking, and the stats at the time were showing that approximately 1 in 4 people could become unwell with a mental health condition, and 1 in 4 could potentially also have a physical health condition, and also put some of those costs based on data from the HSE, for example, average lengths of time taken off for a physical health condition and a mental health condition. And then I used the PwC figures for costing that out in terms of what does that look like from an absence and presenteeism perspective. Presenteeism is something that is a real interest of mine as well, and I noticed last summer, actually it was a chairman then, I think Kevin Ellis from PwC, who went out and published quite widely and said, is this the end of presenteeism now, with so many more people working from home, etc. And I think interesting discussion, and maybe that's something for another day, Andreas. But again, you know, here we are a year later. I think we still are definitely seeing presenteeism. And then the 1 in 5 has essentially become, for me anyway, the gold standard of measurement now. So it was a really good report actually that came out from Deloitte, which is refreshing the case for investment. So we've always had real challenges over the years to being able to effectively measure our return on investment from some of those softer investments that the business makes. But for those of you who might be interested, it is a really good report, so please do have a look. So 1 in 5 you will quite often see now quoted as a return on investment. And throughout the last 12 months, as I said, we've also been, as well as kind of listening and encouraging two-way communication, we've also been talking a lot in the business about raising awareness about kindness, compassion and care, and building on that. We want to essentially launch out to the business and put care at the heart of Vinci facilities. So we also recently launched a new wellbeing policy a few months ago, where we were looking at prioritising mental health, or giving mental health the same priority that we give to both physical health and safety. And also the piece about, by caring for our people, we want every day to have a good day at work as well. And then as part of the slides and the wellbeing strategy piece that I took the business through, we've also put, you know, what do we actually want to achieve from that? And I think the key message that I started with is this is a culture change programme. You know, this is a long-term piece. This isn't something that is suddenly going to change in 3 or 4 months. So I really wanted the business to recognise that. Yes, we really want to promote healthy and happy employees, etc. You know, we want to try and reduce our turnover, and we really need to be able to attract the best people and the top talent into our business as well. We're constantly working and winning new business and getting new projects underway, and actually it's an ever increasing challenge to be able to recruit the best into our organisation. And then I scoped out a 5-year plan as well, and that was just really looking at deliverables, and certainly the last couple of years were more aspirational, which is, can we get involved with some research, some white papers, that kind of thing as well. Thank you, Andreas. So as part of the strategy development, we have agreed on 4 pillars of wellbeing, and I'm sure many of you will not be surprised to see that one of them is health. And within that, yes, of course, we've got the physical health piece where we've got a programme of activities, etc., where we're looking at promoting healthy behaviours, and also encouraging people to take responsibility for their own health and wellbeing. Also, really importantly, which we've done a lot of work on over the last year, that reactive space as well, making sure that we have got tools that can just be switched on to go really quickly when our people need it. And then also we've talked about really raising the profile of awareness around mental health, and within that health space as well, we've also highlighted the need of financial support and assistance too, and so we'll develop in a programme on that for next year onwards. And I think again the learnings from the pandemic are, for example, quite often people have said to me, okay, maybe, you know, I was furloughed but I'm back, but actually within my family, you know, we've had older teenagers who maybe were working already and they were on entry-level jobs, and they may have lost their jobs and actually had 12 months of no income. You know, a partner may have lost their job. So it's been really tough for people out there. And I think the whole financial piece is something that we really need to focus on moving forward. Another key pillar for us is growth, and that's just recognising the value of personal development, really. And we're hoping that our development of our wellbeing ambassadors will help with that growth. And we're also looking at whether we can actually include our wellbeing ambassador role within a job description and our development reviews, etc., to make sure that me as an ambassador, for example, gets something back for that additional role. The belonging piece is massive as well, not just the kind of inclusive piece and recognising all the differences that essentially we bring to Vinci facilities, but also that whole social connection. I know many of us have felt social isolation again over the last few months, and so how can we get some traction from the wellbeing strategy to encourage our wellbeing ambassadors to organise more social events, etc., to really get people feeling like they belong and they can interact again. We've done a lot on challenges this year actually to pull people together, even if it's been virtually, to try and combat some of that isolation. I've actually made a decision to include communication in as a pillar of wellbeing because it's just so integral, I think, to the whole delivery of an effective wellbeing strategy. So this is where we'll look at tone of voice across the business, and also a biggie for me is encouraging our senior leaders and our supervisors and our managers to be a little bit more open to share about their feelings, just to really promote that kind of and build on that culture of care. And then within that as well is the policy development work. So as and when we develop new policies, are we also looking at those policies from a health and wellbeing perspective? Next slide, please, Andreas. Thank you. So Thrive, I'm sure Andreas and the team are going to talk to you in more detail about Thrive. So I reached out to Thrive probably last November, December now, when we were being asked for lots of additional support around the mental health space. I particularly like Thrive because, as Andreas has already said, it's the only app that uses clinically validated screening methodology. And again, that linked into my real interest about the science behind the programme. So we've worked together with Thrive. We launched in December, and we decided to run a pilot within 2 sectors within Vinci facilities, one with just 130 people and one with 1,500. And we were going to review uptake, etc. Now, a couple of those were really hard to reach people, so some of them weren't even online as well. So we knew we had some real challenges around how to reach people with Thrive. Next slide, please, Andreas. Perfect. And I just thought I'd share some insight as well as the return on investment report that Thrive produced for us. So from the 130, initially we had 24 sign up, we had 17 active users, 15 of those were actually unwell users, which Andreas was just referring to there. And we had a 20% recovery rate, and 10 users sought help. So essentially you can see there as well the top 3 elements of Thrive that people were accessing throughout that 5-month pilot. 21 sessions of CBT followed by meditation and applied relaxation. And then I think we just started or reached the end of our pilot when Jenny said from Thrive, you know, we can actually now produce some really quite detailed return on investment reports for you, which was incredibly useful for us. So I sat down with the 2 divisional directors, we reviewed usage, etc. Feedback for Thrive was brilliant. People were loving it and really finding value from it. And then also I could take them through the additional figures that Thrive had produced for us. So I appreciate these figures are quite small, but this was because this was our pilot for 130 only rather than the 1,500. So based on the 3 people who recovered, 20%, there were 63 days lost in total. And again, Thrive used the average length of absence taken produced by the HSE. What I did is reach out to the 2 business sectors as well and just find out what our average salary was within those areas. So it was quite detailed, and we worked through those figures and we came up with a 11,982 total cost saving, and obviously off that we reduced half the cost of the pilot. So in terms of return on investment, it was actually really high. And it came out at approximately £9.50 for every £1 spent. Now our other pilot that we did came out at just over £2 as well, which is great return on investment, and we were really pleased with that. The reason it came out much lower is because we had a much lower average salary base as well. So there we are, really a quick 10 minutes just kind of sharing with you some of the stats, some of the figures, and how I've used ROI to develop and launch a new strategy. And I think the other piece I just wanted to say as we finish is What really made me very happy at the end of that session was the two directors said, yeah, we like the ROI, let's go ahead and roll this out more widely across facilities. But they also made a point of really saying, but actually it's also the right thing to do for colleagues and for our people, which again was really reassuring to hear from my perspective. Wonderful, thank you, Andrea. So back to yourself.
Thank you very much, Helen. That was a great presentation. I think we'll move on to Tom. Tom, do you want to take us through Fieldfisher's presentation?
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Andreas, and thanks, Helen, as well. So yeah, today I want to talk about wellbeing as a business case in the legal profession and using Fieldfisher as a case study for that. Next slide, please. We can skip this because we've already spoken about me. Great. Firstly, I want to kind of put into context kind of the key challenges that the legal profession kind of faces in terms of the individual themselves and their own well-being, but also the pressures the firms face that has an impact on employee well-being and also influences their views on investment in that kind of space. From the individual perspective, first looking at kind of financial targets. So it's pretty common in most law firms that standardized targets for chargeable billable hours per annum are set for all fee earners. For us, it's 1,500 hours a year, which when you adjust for annual leaves, around 7 hours a day of chargeable work, which they need to kind of put down. And in bigger kind of US firms, we're looking at kind of 2,000 hours a year. So a lot of pressure and demand on people in that kind of space to perform, and that's a key kind of metric to measure their performance and output, and clearly puts some kind of pressure on them to perform. I think as well, we have kind of the pleasure of working with, multinational kind of global clients, but these are all very demanding. They kind of expect high quality of service, and particularly given the hourly rate that sometimes we can charge, particularly out of London, there's a reason for that. They kind of expect the work to be done quickly to a high standard, and in some cases kind of expect service kind of around the clock if you've got clients based in the US and so on. It's also a very highly competitive industry to kind of progress in. Ultimate aim for a lot of people is to become a partner, but that takes a lot of time and requires a client base and a book of business, as they say, and that can take time to progress and develop, and there's a lot of pressure to kind of reach that next level to be kind of a partner and a senior figure of a firm. There's also pressure when it comes to kind of non-chargeable work. So kind of the modern lawyer is not just about kind of practicing the law and being technical. It's also about winning new work and developing relationships with existing clients and managing large and diverse teams. And that all has to be done on top of your chargeable work as well. So there's kind of a lot of responsibility on our lawyers in the industry. And lastly, is kind of looking at lean structures and high expectations. In some specialisms, particularly kind of transactional areas, kind of corporate or real estate, is a significant amount of pressure in the market on what we can charge, and therefore what resource we as a firm can kind of assign to those matters or cases. And the result of that is kind of quite lean structures for particular files or matters that we work on, but still kind of high expectations on the individual to provide a high quality service that is cost effective as well. And then looking at what kind of pressures that we face, and that kind of has an impact on the wellbeing, but also influences kind of our thoughts as well. As I said, it's a very highly competitive industry to secure new clients and maintain existing ones. There's a lot of law firms out there. There's a lot of US firms which are in the market now, which are kind of active in that space, and therefore there's naturally a pressure on the firm to provide exceptional client service and meet those needs, but also invest in that area to kind of maintain that business and remain kind of remain profitable and growing. We also have the pressure of kind of balancing client service and cost. As I mentioned, some specialists have a lot of kind of cost kind of issues in terms of what they can charge and competitors in the market. And the result of that is that sometimes we can't give the same amount of resource to that type of work, or more junior resource, which is cheap, has to be assigned to it, or the same level of client service is expected but at a lower cost, which has an impact on obviously the individual's financials. And all of those have a kind of create their own sort of pressures on the individuals and the firm as well. I think recruitment and retention pressures are particularly prevalent as well at the moment. The legal market at the moment is very, very hot. There's more jobs than there are lawyers, and you might see some of the press, newly qualified lawyers being offered salaries of £100,000 per year after qualifying, which great time to be a lawyer particularly. But there's obviously clearly pressure on hiring staff and getting people replacements in they do leave, but also retaining staff. There's a lot of focus on remuneration and reward to keep them, and maybe not other areas. It's also kind of a generational perceptional kind of issue. I think the older generation, particularly amongst some partners, is that I was worked especially hard when I was younger. why can't my juniors, and then changing that sort of mindset is quite a struggle, along with kind of the stigma that's involved as well. And then lastly, ultimately, is money invested in any sort of kind of service in the firm, be it technology or well-being or whatever, is ultimately taking profit away from the business, and it's those profits that pay the members of the firm, and that's how kind of their pay works. So obviously managing those profits, those drawings, and keeping those partners happy is a difficult kind of subject to navigate. Next slide, please, Andreas.
There we go.
Cool. So looking kind of what kind of we do as at Fieldfisher in terms of wellbeing. So we introduced a formal wellbeing program in 2016, and making sure we were focusing on the 4 pillars of wellbeing, being financial, physical, social, and psychological. The initial part of the strategy was really kind of bring together kind of various resources that we had operating, sometimes in isolation, but also to kind of build on those to ensure we're providing a broad offering to our staff across these pillars, and make sure we're kind of matching what our competitors do in the market, but also importantly doing the right things for our staff. What you can see on the infographic there are some of maybe more kind of typical kind of service and offerings you may expect of a law or professional services firm. But some of the key things to highlight that we've really kind of pushed in recent years is firstly our I+ program, and that's really been driven about awareness and learning about kind of key wellbeing issues, be it kind of sleep or nutrition or mindfulness. And then more recently, we've adapted that to look at kind of specific topics in terms of kind of childcare or return to the office or remote or hybrid working, which are obviously very relevant at this time. We established a mental resilience support team along with values advocates as well. So the support team are all trained in mental health first aid or kind of mental health champions, and the purpose of them is really to kind of advocate and promote and be a driver for positive wellbeing within their group. So we purposely kind of targeted training individuals across all departments, across all locations, and across varying levels of seniority to really kind of help involve themselves and make sure kind of wellbeing is a gender item in their teams, and make sure it's a relevant topic for all of them. And values advocates is there really there to kind of champion the firm's values and make sure kind of we are committed to those, and we have a number of people across various offices to do that, and they're there to make sure we kind of help uphold those and help individuals speak out if they feel like the values aren't being adhered to. We've also pushed a lot of kind of networks in the firm across a variety of kind of topics. So women at work in the workplace, LGBTQ, we've got disability or Discover Network, and diversity inclusion network called the Network as well. And they're kind of arenas to really kind of discuss these kind of key relevant issues at the moment and drive positive change within the business with our staff and in conjunction with our support teams across the business. We also also introduced kind of Clear Review, which is kind of continuous performance development platform and moving away from the annual appraisal. And the purpose of that is to have more regular conversations about performance, but also actually looking at wellbeing and kind of make sure there's more open discussions about that throughout the year at various points to ensure those kind of conversations are happening. And lastly, wellbeing weeks, I&D months, various events of lunch and learns, challenges, sessions that we really kind of heavily promote across all our offices. And most recently, we had a number of kind of partners and employees kind of post videos about kind of their own struggles of mental health and well-being, and really trying to relate that to our staff about why it matters and why it's important we help people in that sort of space. Moving on. But in terms of challenges, so despite all of this, there are obviously still improvements that we are working on in terms of our strategy to improve what our offering is, and the priority really now is to ensure that we are equipping staff much sooner in the journey. So we need to looking to provide tools and support that help manage their wellbeing before the point of kind of ill health, effectively. We do this already from a kind of awareness learning point of view through our I+ program, but some of the benefits and services we provide are more supportive at the end point rather than preventative at the start point. So a lot of kind of work in that kind of area. Stigma is still going to be an issue in the industry, and that's something we have to actively work on as we communicate with the business and our managers and our staff. We're seeing noticeable improvements in that sort of communication and dialogue with our staff, and I would say kind of mental health is probably the most common kind of absence we see at the moment. But that still appears to be more at the kind of the crisis stage and perhaps not sooner. And in a highly competitive field, there's still that kind of perception that struggling with mental health or kind of well-being generally may harm their careers. And whilst that obviously is not the case, it's still a barrier that we have to overcome as a firm and as an industry. I think time investment for staff is particularly challenging for us. I think lawyers are very busy and there's a lot of charitable work and expectations on them. And then as part of that, they may be not investing in time into the service we had with regards to our well-being. They therefore perhaps maybe take priority with their kind of charitable work instead, and therefore we're looking at kind of diversifying the way we kind of engage with our community, and also alter expectations of our management to let their staff involve themselves more with these kind of well-being initiatives. And then wellbeing investment as a whole, I think we all recognise as HR professionals, we can and should do more, and we do help. But investment takes money and also time, and getting that buy-in is crucially important, which is why things like ROI are particularly relevant and useful for us to ensure we are continually enhancing and diversifying our offering, and ensuring that we're really kind of providing kind of tangible, measurable benefits and output for these investments to both help the individuals, but also show the kind of business case for the firm. So next slide. Cool. So as part of that, we introduced Thrive back in December 2020 on an initial kind of 3-month trial basis. And as part of that is, as I discussed, in terms of about intervening sooner with our staff, and we're providing a preventative tool to help. We were kind of in the midst of the kind of second lockdown when we introduced this, so it's particularly relevant at that time. And it was part in response to some of the kind of well-being pressures we're seeing in the business. It's particularly a lot kind of lockdown fatigue at the time. So we had 250 trial licenses available. So we assigned a block of those to our HR team and mental resilience support team, and also value advocates. And we assigned the remaining licenses to the wider business, kind of open and available for them to use. We are kind of extensive kind of promotional campaign from HR in conjunction with our heads of department and our support team to ensure there's kind of buy-in from the off, and to ensure that people's kind of buy-in from the off, and it was particularly relevant and useful because at the time kind of the awareness of wellbeing issues during lockdown was quite prevalent and in people's minds. So those people promoted within the departments and offices. We kind of ran live demos and Q&As and so on, and interest was quite good from the off. So at our best, we had around 150 users within the first 3 months, most of who were kind of actively using the app regularly. We held feedback drop-in sessions and surveys and so on, and the feedback was really positive, and we saw some quite warm messages from people who had kind of suffered bereavements kind of during lockdown, who had used the app, and it had kind of helped them recover, so to speak. And it was really kind of good to see that kind of impact it was making in the business. So after much kind of deliberation and debate with management, it was kind of looking at the app long term. Kind of the MI and ROI available in the app was kind of a key selling point to ensure it's providing the right benefits and effectiveness to our staff and the business. And it's now kind of a key resource within our kind of wellbeing armory. So looking at ROI, so you can see on the screen, so you had 250 licenses to start off with and 137 signed up in the first 10 weeks. 119 were active users and 101 reported some sort of kind of symptom regarding kind of depression or anxiety. 21 of those recovered, which is obviously fantastic. And then using the calculation as Helen kind of talked through, and looking at our average salary of £60,000 for staff in our UK offices, the return was over £100,000 for those people, and based on the investment made afterwards when we went live, that's a return of 6.5 to 1, which I think is really positive for us, and really was kind of the backbone of the case for keeping the app long term. Cool. And last slide, and I think it's one to kind of cover off kind of why it's important for us to use these measures, and particularly MI and ROI. So from the individual's perspective, knowing how I'll be able to see the MI and ROI helps understand what the effectiveness of the service is, and most importantly for the individual and their health. Ultimately, we want to make sure we're helping them as people, and seeing this really kind of help justify that. The service that shows positive influence through data means we are better positioned to encourage further investment in wellbeing, which I think we all agree that we need to kind of keep doing. It's not only understanding about helping understand the firm management about the business impact, but also shows the individual's engagement with these services. So and the effect it can have on their health and well-being. So if managers understand that better and the impact it's making, we hope that will mean there's more kind of engagement with them on individuals' well-being on a more kind of personal level. And also the MI helps us establish kind of themes of stressors in the business, and we hope that we can provide services that are targeted and more effective to individuals and their well-being and most relevant. And for the law firm itself, it is a direct quantifiable impact of days lost for ill health. They're not working, they're not fee earning, and the impact on revenue, but also on client services is there to be seen and can be seen in the numbers. If we can prove data recovered, it's directly linked to what revenue we can produce in return. Investment in such services is a financial cost to the firm, and as I say, takes away from profits, and therefore we need to justify such investments. And buying is much easier if we can do that through ROI and establish value for what we're doing. And as I say, kind of fee in their time is a tangible commercial value, and time invested by them and not kind of other kind of chargeable work needs to, they need to be effective, and so do we. So, and that's not only on a personal, but also kind of a commercial level as well. And the data helps back that up. I think lastly as well, kind of we've adopted hybrid working, and that will be the part of the course. Not seeing each other the same way as often or face to face means I think there's less observable impact about how people are doing and their well-being, things you may kind of see kind of as you're around the office, and therefore having the data to kind of back that up on a kind of global level is something we're kind of keen to utilize more often and make sure kind of people are utilizing these services and doing better as a result. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Tom. Claire, would you like to take us through your presentation?
Next slide, please. So, yeah, I mentioned earlier we're 7 businesses in the NDA group. I work at the corporate centre in Cumbria, and you'll see that we've got 17 sites across the United Kingdom. And we're very, as you'll see from the map, we're very in remote locations for many of us, and we're very close in our communities. And the reason I mention that is because during the pandemic, for example, the occupational health clinicians at Doon Ray were on the front line working in the local hospitals. So we've got those really close community ties. Over the last 12 months, we've really strengthened and simplified the way our group is organised, and collaboration is absolutely key to what we're doing. And we recognise that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And we say that because we recognise, to do the mission, to fulfil our mission, we really must all work together and not as silos. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our mental health and wellbeing journey began back in 2017, 2018, and we got some really, really early on executive sponsorship. So Dr. Adrian Simper, our strategy and technology director, came forward as our mental health lead. Picture him on the slide there. And we took part in the Lord Mayor's campaign, This Is Me. And we were able to create our own video, This Is Me in Nuclear, which is available. It's easily found online. And a number of our colleagues from across the group came forward and were quite open and very brave and shared their personal stories about their mental health. And that really was such an important piece of destigmatization work, and really was really the catalyst for our kind of our work that's gone on in this area. Around this time, the Stevenson Farmer report was published and the 10 standards were introduced, Thriving at Work, and we committed early on that we would use that as our framework. That would be our foundation, and we committed to achieving the 6 core and 4 enhanced standards, and that really is still with us today. That is kind of our framework for everything that we do. Moving on into about 2019, mental health and wellbeing became a beacon project. It was one of 4 projects across the NDA group that was given special status, and it was seen that it affected every single employee across the group. Every part of the business was affected by wellbeing and mental health, and to give it that focus was really important. And we started reporting at board level, and we were able to really just get some traction as well across the workforce. We formed the One NDA Mental Health Delivery Group. Now, this is the engine room. This is where all the plans come together. This is where innovation and ideas are discussed, and we take best practice and we decide, what do we think will work for us? We also recognise that one size doesn't fit all. So when we're looking at initiatives and roll out things, we think, well, will that work for that particular element of the group, or will that work for everybody? But one thing we did do was, as a group, was we decided to standardise our EAP offering. And with that, we did that last year. And that's when we all also agreed that we wanted to work with Thrive. I just wanted to briefly touch on mental health first aiders. So all of our businesses now have rolled out mental health first aid, and we did it in a very carefully and considered way. We went through really quite rigorous recruitment and selection for our mental health first aiders, working with Mind, and we made sure that clinical supervision is really factored into the role. And we've really upskilled them as well in the use of the EAP and Thrive, encourage them to use the app as well, so they can look after their well-being, recognising that you have to look after yourself really before you can help others. So we keep a really close eye on that community. Earlier this year, we took place in the Mind Workplace Wellbeing Index, and many businesses on this call might have had the opportunity to do that as well. It was really good in terms that it gave us a benchmark. So we've been working on this and investing time and effort into this, and we feel like we're doing okay, but we didn't really know for sure. So we took part in the index earlier this year, and we were so pleased when we received a silver award, which means that we are doing some really good work in this area, but there's still room for improvement. So we'll be working on our future plans and going through that cycle again in about 2 years' time. Next slide, please. Thank you. Earlier this year, I just put this slide in about our inclusion, our D&I strategy. So D&I is something that we started to really focus on back in 2018, and we launched our first strategy. And this is really the moving that forward quite considerably. One thing that is a priority for us is employee voice and hearing what it is actually like to work here in the NDA. So at the moment, it just went live this week. We're running for the first time an NDA group employee engagement survey, and it's quite a detailed survey. And we have been open and said it is going to take a good 30 to 40 minutes to complete, but we have really importantly included 10 wellbeing questions. So I think that's a really important, it's another benchmark for us, but it's another exam. It's going to really tell us what is it actually like to work here and what can we do to improve. Next slide, please, Andreas. Okay, so Thrive. So we, as I said, the NDA Mental Health Delivery Group looked at Thrive, and we decided that is something that we really wanted to do. And we had a soft launch earlier in actually March 2020. We kind of whitelisted the app on NDA business phones because there were some practical things that we had to sort out. And then we went for a full launch in October. We absolutely love the app because, like Helen and Tom have said, it's NHS approved. It's approved for the workplace. It's for prevention and early detection. It's something that we thought that staff could really use proactively to manage their health. But it also gives that external signposting to support, such as our EAP. We love that we're able to access management information at group level. We don't measure anything at individual business level. So we're looking for the trends that tell us what's actually some of the issues that are happening across the group, and that's going to inform our future wellbeing plans. One thing we did do in the first lockdown was introduce Wellbeing Wednesdays, and they've stayed with us and they've been a real success, and they've had a lot of engagement. And we're actually using Thrive to help us run some of the sessions now. So for example, during the summer, we ran some resilience sessions, and in November, we're going to be running some promoting positive mental health in winter. So there's really other aspects for Thrive that we're tapping into and really utilising that resource for us. Another example of this is earlier this week on Monday, it was World Menopause Day, and we had the absolute pleasure of Dr. Andreas coming to present to us for a webinar. We had a really interactive, really open discussion with the people that dialed in on there, and it's just it was really, really well received. We have an employee network called Menoho, and that's for men and women. Everyone is welcome. It's an open area for shared resources about the menopause in particular. And we recognise, and we learned from Dr. Andreas as well, that anxiety and depression is a really important symptom, can be a really prevalent symptom during the perimenopause. So again, signposting to Thrive, signposting to prevention, building awareness is really, really valuable for us. Another thing that we're working on is sustainable mental health training, and we hope to pilot this in the very early part of 2022. And this is for 2 particular cohorts. We have some line managers and some PhD students actually that we're going to put forward to work on a pilot. The benefit of this for us and for them is that it's CPD accredited, so we know that the content, the quality of the content, it's validated and the delivery method is validated. So we're really excited to do this pilot, and maybe if we come back to this event next year, I'll be able to feedback on that as well. One thing that we've found that Thrive does is integrate really easily into our other wellbeing campaigns and initiatives. So we do mark a lot of the key awareness days, for example, World Mental Health Day, Mental Health Awareness Week, which you'd expect. So we're always able to bring the Thrive in to promote the resources that are available, and it really just slots in very nicely as part of the toolkit. An example of that is our Make a Change challenge. Just next slide, please. Thank you. So the Make a Change challenge is an in-house wellbeing challenge that we developed. It's set up about 5 years ago, and it's really grew each year. We hope to keep growing on it and making it better for our staff. It's a series of physical, mental and creative challenges really. So we get people in teams and have daily activities. They're not all mandatory. You can opt in and opt out as you wish. So we've got daily exercise, action for happiness. We encourage people to download the Thrive app and take part in an activity. The last time we ran this in the summer, our activity was calm breathing. We encourage people to get creative, looking at the 5 ways to wellbeing. So that could be an art project or something, a picture that people do together. Get connected to people doing the quiz. And what we found was in the summer of this year, there was a huge jump in the new users on the app. About 300 people downloaded the app during the Make a Change challenge and got involved in the activities. There's just some feedback on the bottom that somebody's let us know that they really enjoyed using the app and found the techniques beneficial. We're running the Winter Make a Change challenge in January, and we're going to build in Thrive again, and we're going to be hopefully running a mindfulness challenge. So we're really looking forward to that. Next slide, please. The last one, yeah. So what's next? So where we are now, we're looking at our engagement plan for 2022 to continue to increase usage. We've about 1,000 users now on the app. So we want to keep promoting, not only for new people to get involved, but to continue to use it and not put it down and forget about it, but to continue to use it and to get the benefit of it. We're hoping that the data that we're going to get back is going to really underpin our next part of our mental health and wellbeing strategy and inform our activities going forward. One thing we really want to do is hear from our staff, though. We want them to tell us where they have benefited from accessing this support and other support that's available. So we're looking for a program. We're going to plan a program of storytelling campaigns, such as podcasts and blogs. And one thing that we're really working on as well is reviewing our agile working practices. Hybrid working is here to stay, and some of our staff are absolutely embracing it and some people are not so keen. So we really need to continue to keep that under constant review and make sure that also feeds into our wellbeing plans. That's all from me, thank you.
There we go, sorry. There we go. So I think we will now open up for questions, and we do have a few questions already in the chat. So I think what I'll do is I'll bring those in. One of the questions, Helen, everybody was very interested in the 2 reports that you quoted. So you were talking about the PwC report and the Deloitte report, and everybody wants to know, why can we get it? I mean, I think I found the Deloitte one, so I put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Have you? Okay. Shall I send you? I'll see if I can dig out the PwC one. If not, I'll send the link across to you so that you can share it with the team. They're definitely both worth a read.
Yeah, it sounded like a very, I was familiar with the Deloitte, but I was not familiar with the PwC myself. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to go through it. Okay, so because we will do at the end, we will send an event handbook. I will make sure that we put that information in as well as additional information for everybody. Okay, so I think Helen and I think all 3 of you actually, to be honest, mentioned having some kind of a well-being ambassador or a champion or something like that, and I think everybody was wondering. What is that role in your different companies, and also how do you select? So I think Claire, you mentioned sort of talking to mine, for the selection process and that sort of thing, which I was interested to hear. But yeah, so if I go Helen first, tell us about the role of ambassador in your company in Vinci, and how does that work, and how do you select people?
Yeah, sure. So the Wellbeing Ambassador is going to be new. We have some Wellbeing champions and we have networks of champions, but we wanted to reposition the role slightly and make it a little bit more strategic. And I already mentioned the fact that we're working with HR to actually make that part of their role profile, etc. So just give it a bit more credibility, I think, in my view. And then the Wellbeing Ambassador programme will be part of the Recalibrate Wellbeing programme, which we will be launching next year, where the ambassador goes through 12 coaching sessions around different elements of wellbeing, around stress management and physical, etc. So and then at the end of that, they've got a session to just talk about barriers and how best to communicate it within their areas. So in terms of, we're just agreeing the comms plan now, and what we'll be doing is, my view is that we're really keen to reach our front line, because what I found previously in a couple of our other businesses is we get a huge take up from our office population. But actually for us as well, really valuable to get our office population on board, but we really need to reach to make a difference, to drive that culture of care across the business. We've got to reach our front line. So we're working really closely with the comms team to come up with some innovative and creative ways to do that. And then really all we're asking for is a passion and interest in wellbeing, but we're making sure that it's not a line manager saying, oh, we need 3 in our area, you can do it, because previously I found that those ambassadors or champions tend to not be the most effective ones, and then I'm going to spend kind of 10-15 minutes talking to each of our ambassadors before they come on board to the programme. So we're going to try and sell it in as a really exciting thing for them to do.
Thank you. Tom, what about your programme with your champions? Or I think you also have is it champions that you call them?
Yeah, we have like a mental resilience support team, which we established when we set up our wellbeing program. When we trained all kind of HR members and kind of frontline managers on kind of first aid or mental health champions, just to make sure they feel equipped in their roles to kind of handle those sorts of issues. But in addition to that, we set up the network to ensure that we have people across all our business units and locations and across a varying level of seniority. Ultimately, to ensure we have a spread of people who are promoting and signposting people locally within their groups, and to ensure that kind of conversations regarding kind of mental health and wellbeing are happening at a local level. Obviously, it's something that HR can push centrally, but it needs to be activity locally as well. So any sort of kind of firm initiatives there as kind of points of contact and people to drive those things forward in that space. We've also we put together a very short spec on what we expect these people to do, and what we did in terms of recruitment of those people is that we made it open for people to put forward. And I think ultimately, as long as they've got a kind of a passion, interest, understanding, and a kind of passion for kind of the issues and want to be involved and understand what's kind of expected of them with their roles, then we have to kind of consider them forward. So I mean, that's what we've ultimately tried to achieve, and I think it's something that will continue to grow because it has worked, and it has kind of normalized it amongst teams and made it a discussion point amongst groups, which I think is obviously vitally important, but has also helped us kind of promote what we're doing centrally to the business to ensure there's kind of traction at those kind of local levels and across those locations, as we have quite a few.
And Claire, what about in your? I mean, because you had quite a comprehensive approach, and you also mentioned supervision. Yeah, well, when we first started talking about mental health first aid, I'm going to be honest. Our exec sponsor, Adrian, he needed to be convinced that, and he wanted to be reassured that this was going to be done properly, that people weren't just going to be trained and then let out into the workplace and potentially cause more harm than good. So very, very clear on the role that it's very much a active listening role, signposting role. It's not about giving advice. It's not about being counsellors. As part of the clinical supervision, they have the opportunity for monthly drop-ins informally, but a formal one-to-one on a bi-monthly basis.
This is an opportunity for them to debrief, raise concerns, but also if Mind, our lead at Mind, has any concerns as well about the person in the particular role, if things are not working out, that they can obviously raise that then in that safe space. We also keep having learning events, keep them upskilled on relevant things. So obviously, like you Thrive app, EAP, keep that at the forefront of the mind for their signposting. We've got another group of people who've got an interest in the topic. So they are people who have a day job, who's not working in health and wellbeing or HR, but they're really passionate about the topic and want to give their time to work on our programme. And what we're working on at the minute is making that explicitly in their job description, so that they can carve out the time during working hours that they can, and we've really recognised that's so valuable. And we don't want people working on this at 10 o'clock at night, you know, because they're passionate about the topic. We want to, you know, give them the time. So that's something that's come out and that we're working on at the minute.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So from what we know, first aid works, you know, in kind of that context when you're able to sort of help people sort of carve out some time to actually do it, and offer them support and supervision and offer them retraining. I think so. You've got kind of all the elements.
Yeah,
all the elements there.
Really important. Annual refresher training, yeah, which I don't think is actually mandatory for the qualification, but we have adopted best practice.
But is you know is what I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, as a minimum, so, really, yeah.
Yeah. I had a question myself, which I'll bring in because I was interested to hear Tom talk about changing mindsets of senior staff when it comes to, you know, the way they were working and try to get them to see that there's perhaps a different way or a better way to work, or that these things that we're talking about today, like well-being, needs to be taken into consideration. What sort of inroads have you made with that, and what's been your strategy to change senior management minds?
From us, our strategy so far, I think it's firstly it's respecting that, you know, the legal environment is quite a difficult one. There are obvious stresses and demanding realities, and that people need the support. And the fact we didn't have support when they were younger, when they were training and being lawyers, doesn't mean it's right not to now. I think also we recognise that not people need it. It's a provision that all firms are providing at the moment, and being comprehensive in that field is vastly important from that perspective. I think also as well, you know, we recognise, you know, being in the competitive industry, we expect a lot, we need a lot, our clients require a lot, but to match that kind of demand, we need to provide the right support, and that's not only through service and provision, but also through kind of training and education amongst management as well. So I think what we try to drive is kind of related to what the work they're doing and what the kind of firm strategy is as a whole, and making sure that we can deliver that in a kind of sustainable way for people. Because, for example, Fieldfisher's gone through kind of significant growth in the past kind of 5 years. We've got double the amount of officers we've had, and revenue's gone up by a considerable amount. As a result of that, our demands have gone up considerably as well as the firm expectations. So just kind of realizing that fact with the reality of that, you know, with these high expectations means kind of high level of support is needed in return, and understanding of that. So and I think also, you know, in the industry we're in, kind of bottom line, well, no, bottom line's key in most in all industries, but the bottom line really is a kind of a pressure point for us to remain competitive, and showing what that return can do in this sort of investment in well-being, and the return and kind of the impact that they can have is really, really important. So that's what we kind of targeted, and you know, with reasonable success. You know, I definitely think normalization is definitely happening. Stigma is reducing, but there's still a lot more. In the past 18 months have already kind of highlighted that.
There's another, thank you very much. Yeah, so there's another question. I suppose it was directed to you, Tom, but I suppose it's reasonable to sort of get everybody's opinion on it, which is about, does the wellbeing program in itself, do you think that in itself is helping to change culture? And if it is, which of the factors, which of the pillars, which of the strategies is the thing that you think moves culture the most? If I start with, let me start with Helen. Do you think it impacts culture? You know, the focus on well-being and your well-being strategy.
I think I think it absolutely does, and I think I mentioned in my case study that we've positioned it very much as, you know, bringing in a new strategy around it is very much a culture piece. And I think for me, there's a great opportunity for all the programs, etc., that support it. But the crux of this is really around the psychosocial factors that influence well-being, you know, about line manager style, the environment you work, whether you're working in a safe environment. And a big piece of work that we're doing is trying to get that message through that whole well-being piece is kind of integral to the whole business. It shouldn't be seen as an add-on kind of program of activities, etc. Yes, I think that plays a really important part in a wellbeing strategy, but I think to be really, really effective, it has to be part of that whole culture of the organisation. And again, following on from Tom and Claire, you know, using some of your engagement scores and what's the data telling you, and what are those risks that are coming through to tackle some of those areas.
Yeah, and Claire, what about your study? Do you see it as a way of changing culture, or is it just your comments?
Yeah, absolutely.
on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the nuclear industry, it's very safe, it's very highly regulated, very safety focused. That's long-standing. Safety is the #1 priority, and I've really seen the language change to safety and well-being. It's really becoming the physical and the mental health are being seen together. I know I work in this area, so I see it day to day, but I'm really seeing that change coming in. I've had feedback from new starters. We've recruited a lot during the pandemic, and people are saying, you know, it feels like a really great place to be. There's lots of opportunities to engage on the topic, and there's lots of support available. They're seeing that, and they're very family first as well. Family first has been the real mantra for us since COVID, and we're hoping to take, you know, some of those silver linings really from the pandemic and really integrate that into our business as usual. So yeah, definitely a really important part of our culture.
Thank you very much. I think we had another question. It was initially directed at Tom, but I think everybody can also tell us about their approach. So a lot of pressure when we're trying these well-being strategies, a lot of pressure is sometimes put on the manager. We train the managers, we ask the managers to open up these discussions, we ask the managers to sort of take them quite a bit on board, and they already have a lot on their plates. How do we equip managers at being able to sort of open up these discussions, and when they have actually gained the skills and the I suppose the confidence to sort of talk about these topics, how do we empower them to help signpost, seek help, but also to sort of talk about themselves, you know, and open up about themselves if they are struggling themselves? Any thoughts on that? Maybe I'll come to Tom first.
Yeah, I mean, our approach for managers, I mean, firstly is a lot of training to start off with in terms of awareness, but also practical support to ensure that they kind of feel equipped to have those kind of conversations. To start off with, at least giving them the kind of foundation to kind of respond to those sorts of issues as they come along, because it's all very good, well, on a very good kind of us normalizing the issue, but if we don't feel equipped to kind of respond to that conversation, else it makes it a bit more difficult. So there's that. I think there has to be a kind of like a lot of kind of like on-demand sort of coaching from kind of HR or other professionals to support them through those conversations if they feel that someone is struggling, if they've seen the kind of signs based on what they've learned in their training, to kind of to coach them through how to approach it, what things to look out, what things have they noticed, what things should they delve into, and to also, I think, also kind of reassure them that it's a conversation that can be had in a kind of safe and fair way, and also kind of drum home what kind of benefit that can have both short and long term to do so. I think always key in my roles have always be involved and have ongoing guidance with the manager and dialogue to ensure that there's always kind of frequent conversations to make sure they feel continually confident, because obviously things can change over a matter of time, as well, to make sure they feel supported for all of that. I think ultimately it's been a case for us, it's been ensuring that we're kind of normalizing the issue to make sure that people think it's actually okay to discuss it as a whole, as a firm, embed that in our culture, and that's how going to give them the tools to do so. But there's a lot of kind of practical support that we have done and will continue to provide in terms of best practice of how to deal with those situations kind of on hand for people. And over time they become more confident and more able to do so, which we've kind of seen to some good success here at the firm.
Brilliant. And Claire, what about your managers? How do you empower them to have these difficult conversations?
We have done some training throughout, the last 12 months and having the conversations. There's varying degrees of comfort within the comfort levels within the line manager community. Some are really embrace it and they feel fine to do that, and some are a bit nervous. So it's just making sure that we find those people who aren't as confident and give them that extra support. We have regular line manager briefings. We're always reminding them of the support that's available, and reminding them it's for them as well. It's not just for their team members, it's actually for them as line managers, that they also need the support and need to look after themselves. And that was one of the really key things that we talked to Zoe and the team about with the line manager sustainable training, was that it gives, not only does it provide the upskilling on having the conversations around mental health and well-being, but it's also building in the reflective practice for them. We thought that was really important. So we're really keen to find out, how that lands with the with some of the line managers that we've picked for the pilot.
Brilliant. And Helen, what about in Vinci? How's that working?
Yeah, we're well, again, just kind of within facilities, which we were getting a little bit, like you were saying, Andreas, lots of feedback about confidence. Line managers were saying that they'd really like to help and support people. Also, not just preventatively, but also if they are unwell. And we had some feedback from some of our HR colleagues feeling that line managers should play more of a role in that. And so for facilities, we're not recommending a mental health first aid approach for different reasons. What we've rolled out and what I've developed is a program called the Care Toolkit program. We launched it in March this year. And the plan is to put all of our line managers through that through this year and beyond, and moving into next year as well. I think we've had just around 200 through that program. It's a 3.5-hour session, looking at your own behaviours, recognising stress in yourself, how to recognise stress in colleagues, etc., knowing obviously where to signpost through to for support, and also kind of how to help people when they have become unwell as well. And the feedback that we're getting from that program, it's landed really well, and it was actually quite a new thing, or a new concept for facilities. And there was a little bit of discussion about whether we were ready for it. And we've had great buy-in from our divisional directors and our MD of that business. He attended a session early on, and he's been a great advocate actually to shout about it within the business as well. And that really, we meet monthly with the provider and we track the feedback. It's all 4s and 5s out of 5 for that program, and lots of people feeding back that actually that's really starting to create a culture shift. And so that's an integral part of our program. And the next year we'll follow up with kind of a much shorter mental health awareness piece for all. And we're recommending that we go up that approach rather than the MH first aider approach within Vinci facilities. And that, together with other aspects of the strategy, like encouraging people to be more open and our line managers to talk more openly with their colleagues, and all the kind of awareness that we do as well within the business about wellbeing. But this is a real integral program that we're running, and as I said, the feedback, it's early days, but the feedback's really positive that it is starting to shift culture.
Excellent. I think that makes a lot of sense, that comprehensive strategy, and not forget the managers. We're putting a lot on them, supporting them is a key thing to be doing. I thought there was an interesting question, which is, you've all sort of developed this strategy, you've been running it for a while. If you could start from scratch, would you do anything different? Tom?
I wish I could say no, but yeah, there's always things we could do different. I think what we saw quite well after when we cobbled everything together and put it together is that there's great kind of supports and benefit service providers that we can have that really help people at the end point if things are bad and people do get better sooner. But I think if I could change things, I'll probably definitely have focused on the kind of preventative sort of stuff at the start much sooner than we did. I think it's quite easy to go to resources because you can pay for them and just have them available that people just go to when times are bad. But I think it's also important that we if we did it again, making sure kind of helping make and maintain people's well-being when times are good. I think, and doing that more often, and doing that across all the areas. We did it to a good extent regarding kind of awareness, but I think in terms of our kind of benefits and other service provisions, we could have done more in that space. I think we're getting that back now, but I would definitely have highlighted that much sooner if we could have.
Excellent. And what about you, Claire?
Yeah, I think for us, comms is really important, and Helen mentioned in her presentations, it's really integral to the success of any wellbeing or any campaign. And not everybody works in an office or is based at a PC 8 hours a day. So reaching the harder to reach demographics out on working on plants or on sites, just to make sure that they have got access to all the latest information that's available and ways of access and support. And also make sure that the comms is delivered in a way that it's spread out equally, so it's, whether that's weekly or monthly. We do hook onto the key dates in the wellbeing calendar, but we'll much rather be more considered, I think, in that, and make sure that it really, really does become business as usual and not just an initiative. Yeah,
so something that is sustainable and is there all the time, and there is a repeated message, and design it like that from the very beginning.
I think there's always work to be done on comms in anything, isn't it? It's so important.
Yeah. Helen, what about you? What would you do differently if you could start over?
Well, we're just launching ours,
Sure.
and so I kind of went back to front when I joined VC UK, and that I had to backfill a lot of reactive stuff very quickly due to what was going on globally and what is going on globally. So we were quite short on we had Oc Health, we had an EAP. We're super lucky enough that all of our direct employees have access to private medical, and that's the first company that I've certainly worked out that everyone's got access, which is amazing. But apart from that, we were quite short on that instant stuff ready to go. So I kind of went back to front in that I backfilled and pulled together a lot of stuff that the business can use quickly, and then developing the strategy. But actually now it's meant that the strategy we're developing is kind of built on those learnings, and I think that's so important.
Yeah, that makes sense. So keep that feedback loop active and have systems, in your strategy systems where you can detect those changes and what's working and what isn't. I had a question about what is the, do we have any focus on the less spoken about mental health conditions such as ADHD, bipolar affective disorder, and others? The comment was that there seems to be a lot of focus on anxiety and depression. So what about these others? I have my own answer to that, but I'll let you tackle it. How about if I answer? Claire is off camera at the moment, but Claire, can I come to you first about the less frequently talked about mental health conditions?
We do use our contact at Mind actually to talk about some of the more difficult maybe subjects to talk about. So we have done blogs on eating disorders. In particular, we've raised some awareness on that. Postnatal depression, we're talking just small pieces, whether it be a blog or some signposting. So we definitely, it's something that we'd like to look at more and definitely broaden out the range of topics, definitely.
Fair enough. Tom, what about in your company?
When we touched on kind of neurodiversity and other kind of conditions people may suffer with at certain points. We have a kind of a specialist provider who provides kind of input and assessments of people who may have been diagnosed with those conditions, or what we could do better in the workplace. I wouldn't say it's the most commonly sort of talked about subject, but we firstly have talked about it on occasion where necessary, but also have kind of set up services in case things do arise and people do need that support. Because obviously, when they do come up, it's important that they have an outlet to go to. So we have covered it on a few occasions.
And Helen, what about?
Yeah, we haven't done yet. We are still very much at the beginning with the launch. Certainly, it is something that will develop and grow. I did have a session, or took part in a session on neurodiversity a few months ago, and linked that into our inclusion group that meet regularly as well, to see what additional support we can provide for people. But in terms of shouting about it and going business wide, no, that's not our immediate priority, but certainly it's something as we've launched or after we've launched that we will be looking at in more detail.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the reason there's a focus on depression and anxiety is they are far and away the most frequent, so the ones that you encounter the most. So it makes sense to focus on those first. I mean, our approach internally is obviously we have the app, and also we have the therapy team, and the therapy team can deal with just about anything at the mild, moderate age, level. So that's our thinking. So we provide resources to do with that. Also, a lot of the techniques that we have are useful, not just in depression and anxiety, but in other mental health conditions. And we have a transdiagnostic approach to our design. So when we think about the interventions that make sense to be included, we make sure that they can address a range of presentations, not just depression and anxiety. Okay, what do we have? We have another question about, there's one about, the blank check question. I'm not going to put that to you because I thought there were some of the more hard-hitting questions later. Yeah, so there was one here talking about when you're thinking about introducing new services, or when you're designing your strategy, what are the things that you're using to decide which services to introduce? Is it ROI, or are there any other factors that you think about? How do you think about this topic? I'll throw it to Helen first.
Yeah, so ROI very much. And when I say ROI, that could be across the remit. So what's our EAP data telling us? What are our referrals to occupational health, etc. Kind of, I guess, to a degree, any data we can get hold of, as well as sickness absence data as well. So I think ROI plays a big part in that. I think also because we are establishing really good two-way communication, that also influences and plays a really big part. So if we've got an area of the business that's saying, look, actually our people are really feeling this at the moment, and if that comes back through the forum and we pick that up, then that will come to me, and we'll develop that or incorporate that into our strategy moving forward. So it's very much a combination of data plus feedback from people. What
about Tom, in your case? Is it ROI mainly, or is it
ROI? Definitely, yeah. Everything we do has to be justified by the numbers and the return on that. So I definitely would look at that. I think data particularly, I mean, yeah, there's things that Helen mentioned, like kind of occupational health, sickness absence, all that kind of stuff is all stuff we point to. Feedback from various kind of employee forums or groups or diversity setups we have are particularly important and relevant. But I'd say also kind of recently we look at kind of common trends and themes just in life at the moment. I mean, I'm thinking instances in the past year, obviously COVID aside, things like the kind of Sarah Everard incident and issues arising from that, and also recently we're about to launch like a service to staff which is free for kind of advice if they're suffering any sort of kind of domestic abuse, which we've seen rise quite a bit kind of during lockdown, unfortunately, and having an outlet for people in that respect. So I think it's also picking up common trends and patterns which are happening just in life, really, and see what people may need help and however few they may be.
So ROI is like the start, but there might be other considerations.
Exactly.
Coming from the employees or the larger larger social environment. And what about Claire? What about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the mental health delivery group. Everything goes through that particular group. So of course we'll look at the data, we'll look at the quality of the product or the service. We have to consider how will it land in the business, what will be the engagement, do we think it will work for our people? We test things out with senior leaders or with different network groups, and importantly we pilot things as well. So before we fully commit to a full rollout, because obviously we're multiple sites and large numbers of people, we generally would do a pilot and get some feedback first before making the full commitment. But I think it's really good just to try as many things as possible.
I think we have something like 6 minutes left. I might just ask one more, and then I'll hand over to Craig to see us off. Yeah. So there was one particular person that asked their question twice, so I'm going to perhaps go for that one. Does any of you use the Workplace Resilience and Wellbeing Psychometric, the WRAO, the RAW? Is that something that any of you use at all? There are so many. There are very. I mean, I must say, there's very many different psychometric tools for well-being at work. We use one internally. It's not that one, but that was a question that somebody was asking.
No, we don't use that.
I mean, I think the point that they're trying to make is that it's something that is before, that can highlight things before they're actually happening. Yeah, and that might be a way to raise awareness. But do you use any of those tools at all about psychological well-being in the workplace?
We don't use RAW. Again, for the new strategy, I've put in a new tool, and as you said, Andreas, there's so many out there now. It's literally just kind of working through them and trying to pick something that you think is going to work well for your business. I have put one in there, and I've put one in that the managers can actually own themselves to do that regular check, to get that just-in-time information, because things like your engagement scores, etc., incredibly valuable, but maybe only once or twice, 3 times a year. So how are people feeling now? Is there been a change in the team? Are they under a lot more pressure, for example, than they were the last 3 weeks, that kind of thing. So I do think that kind of tool plays an incredibly important part of a wellbeing strategy and program.
What about Tom? Do you use any measures of that? Any measures of employee well-being, general employee well-being? Anything like that?
Not used that particular measure. No, we've used it for particular kind of on a case-by-case basis. Individuals kind of particularly need it, or kind of presenting kind of sort of kind of concerns and issues if they arise. I think that sort of support is sometimes necessary, but not on a kind of global scale at the moment. No.
No, I mean, one thing that I would say is there are multiple validated tools. There are some that are not really valid. So we have a team of business psychologists working internally that obviously help us select the best tools and recommend the best tools. But one of the things that I wanted to say is that it's very important that it's short, because otherwise your employees are going to really balk at filling like 20 million questions about their well-being. They're just not going to want to do it. So don't introduce one that is long, and introduce one that is evidence-based. That would be my send of message. Craig, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great. Thank you very much, Andres, and thank you to you and all of our speakers today. So Andres, Tom, Helen, Claire, thank you for a very interesting session. And I'm sure you'll all be happy to hear from participants in terms of continuing the dialogue. The recording will be available very shortly to everybody who's registered, so look out for that. And Andres also mentioned a handbook which will be coming your way as well. So thank you for all of that. And just to finish by mentioning our autumn session is continuing very soon. So our next webinar is on November the 2nd. The topic is the right to disconnect, and addresses the topic of is always on, always right in this age of particularly perhaps of hybrid and remote working. So and obviously there with a link to mental well-being as well. And our speaker for that event will be Amanda Chadwick of Krona, and Krona are our sponsors for the event. So I hope you'll join us on November the 2nd at 11 a.m, which is a slightly earlier time than our normal events. And I think, Andres, I think you just wanted to mention this QR code that you just put up in terms of potential booking a demo.
That's right. Thank you, Craig. I forgot to do that because I'm terrible at selling, as everybody can tell. But no, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. So we can do an ROI calculation for the specific business, and also we can book a demo and sort of talk to people through how that works and how that works for their business. So if people are interested, there's the QR code that will take you straight to where you need to go to book that demo. Thank you very much, and thank you, Craig, and thank you all the speakers. Brilliant. I think it was a very stimulating, fantastic evening with all of you. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. And I hope to see you all again soon. Take care and have a good evening. All the best.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Thank you.